This is Dr. Chris's Radio of Horror program and the Radio of Horror YouTube channel. And tonight on Radio of Horror on the YouTube channel, we're going to be discussing the 2000 movie American Psycho starring Christian Bale. And joining us for this 20th anniversary of this American classic is Cati the Blonde in Front of Fear.
Well, hello, all you cool ghosts and ghouls. Yes, it is the Blonde in Front of Fear to talk about one and only American Psycho, directed by Mary Herron and starring Christian Bale, Reese Witherspoon, Willem Dafoe, Josh Lucas, Justin Theroux. It just keeps going on and on. The screenplay was written by Mary Herron and Genevieve Turner and is based on the book by Bret Easton Ellis. Now, if you are unaware of this film, which get out of that rock that you've been living under and watch this, because honestly, in 20 years time, it holds its own. It really does. This is a film about Patrick Bateman, a vice president of mergers and acquisitions for Pierce & Pierce. He is 27 years old. He has a strict morning routine where he does everything to make sure he's clean cut, and Christian Bale, oof, that was some divine casting. Ladies, you will enjoy this, because if he is not in a Armani suit, Christian Bale is normally nude in this film, which I guess that's how he is in the book too. I don't know. I haven't read the book. I may want to, but Patrick is on Wall Street. He has his boring life. He has his boring fiance and his boring friends. One thing he likes to do is kill people. He likes to torture people. He likes to demean people, and he does this all for the thrill. He's one of there's, let's see, I think about 12 people that we see that die in the film. He talks about killing at least 40 to 50. The one that we do see, they're enough. That's fine by me. This is a film that it took a lot to get made. It's set in 1987, which the set design, the score, everything they did to make it look and feel those late 80s was to perfection. Now, one of the things that's very interesting about this movie is that the number of people who were set to be cast and direct ranged from Oliver Stone and Leonardo DiCaprio to Stuart Gordon and Johnny Depp. There was even rumor about David Cronenberg directing and having Brad Pitt and stuff, but lo and behold, they did it for $7 million, and Christian Bale is Patrick Bateman. Now, there are certain lines in this film, like I have to go and return some videotapes. Don't just stare at it, eat it. And a scene where Patrick Bateman and his cohorts look at each other's business cards, that is hilarious. It has laughs, but it's also quite terrifying. Now, you have some people here who went on to be, multiple nominated Oscar-nominated actors and winners. You have Willem Dafoe, who stars as a police officer, as actually a investigator in this film. And for some reason, it could be I don't know, but it's kind of odd that in American Psycho, he looks 10 years younger than he does in Boondock Saints. And Boondock Saints came out a year before American Psycho. So it's interesting looking at that and comparing. But the soundtrack, if anyone is into the 80s, they've got some amazing soundtrack music that they chose for this, which is one of the reasons why the budget was what it was. I mean, it's not because of the casting, because these people weren't even close to what you would spend on them now, but the songs were incredible. It's also one of the most frightening parts of the film when Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman starts to have this beautiful monologue describing how each one of these songs is just what it means to him, and then he goes into this violent frenzy the next scene. Man, it's no wonder this guy has as many Oscar nominations as he does. There is a fatal flaw that I noticed after watching this, which I've seen this movie, I don't know how many times, a dozen, maybe more. There's a scene where Jared Leto plays a frenemy of Patrick Bateman called Paul Allen. Paul Allen is the epitome of what Patrick Bateman wants to be. He gets all the clients, he's got the reputation, and yet throughout this film, Paul Allen has no idea who Patrick Bateman is because he keeps misquote or misidentifying Patrick Bateman as someone else, which is one of the running jokes in this movie. No one knows who people look like or who they are because they don't really care. They'd rather talk about them, make fun of them, and talk horrible crap about them than actually get to know the actual person. But when Paul Allen meets his demise, one, it's one of the best scenes in the film, and there's a little bit of improvisation that Christian Bale did that apparently made the director like fall on the ground laughing. When Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman is trying to record Paul Allen's answering machine by using a tape. That's right, kids. You had to record using a tape in the 80s. He says a thing at the end, hasta la vista, baby. Now, to me, this is a flaw. Why? I mean, you could say, well, people would say that. Not in 87. T2 didn't come out until 1991, and people weren't saying hasta la vista baby like just off the top of their head in 1987, and I highly doubt they were saying it in the banking district that Paul Allen, that whole group of his, would have been in. So to me, that was a little flaw. Other than that, I loved everything about this film. I mean, the monologues that Bale does, the score by John Cale has that slight Alfred Hitchcock feel to it, like So and Rope and all of his early films. It is tense. It is. It honestly is frightening. You can get like a visceral reaction when you're seeing this, and not to mention, I mean, again, the casting is absolutely perfection. It really is, and I recommend seeing this, and it stands the test of time. Go see it, listen to the studio or The Greatest Love of All when you're watching it, but I say go see it again. I own it, and I am happy that I do. And what do you think, Chris?
Greatest Batman Joker movie ever.
Yeah. And I mean, then you've got Willem Dafoe, who's now worked with one Batman, but now two Batman.
It's funny you mentioned the whole thing about William Dafoe looking really young in this movie because, again, as you said, Boondock Saints, and then a year later, he would film. It wouldn't come out for 2 years after this movie, but a year later, he would film Spider-Man the movie and play the Green Goblin. And also, like, the second movie William Dafoe has been in with a Batman, which is also kind of weird because he was in The Lighthouse with Robert Pattinson. A lot of weird connections going on there. I had no idea who Reese Witherspoon was at this point, other than she was in Cruel Intentions, I think, prior to this. So I always saw her as like, oh, it's that girl who made out with she was in the movie with Sarah Michelle Gellar. So I thought she was going to be bigger in this movie because I thought she was already a big star at that point. But I watched this movie when I was 20 years old and I was bored to tears. I rewatched it years later as a much more mature adult, and I totally got into this movie. And then I hunted down the book and read the book, and I was always told that this is the most unfilmable book of all time, and it's a huge insult to feminists and women everywhere. But a woman made the movie.
Well, she directed it, yeah, and I think she did a beautiful job, and especially the scenes that she chose to shoot. I mean, that scene where he's talking to Jean about the pantsuit and that she's prettier than that, and never to wear it again, and to wear heels because that's what he likes. It's like I'm just gagging, like hearing those words come into his, like him talking about that. But then he was a mixed bag, and I know there's many differences from the book and the film, because I know in the book he was definitely way more racist and anti-Semitic, and in the film he seems to be like level-headed, and like especially at the dinner table when he was talking about all the different things of the future that need to change, and we need to have more open things with women's rights and all that stuff. And everyone's nodding, and Bryce, who's played by Justin Theroux, is just like, oh, shut up. And I know, I know from what I've read in the book, that's not how the character was at all. So, but I also know that any monologue that Patrick Bateman says in the film is supposed to be word for word what is in the book. Bret Easton Ellis knows how to write male dialogue from the 1980s standpoint, at least misogynistic, prickish male dialogue. I mean, Lord knows we all love to hear that monologue about how a girl can't have a personality because if she does, then she's ugly. It's like, I love watching those guys talk. I'll admit it. Like Josh Lucas, Justin Theroux, you are so pretty. You could just read a crappy phone book to me, and I think I'd be okay.
I love his workout. His workout is to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think another movie years later would do a workout scene to this movie, but I can't remember the name of the movie that does that. But this, his montage sequence and getting prepared and things like that, I think that definitely influenced the opening sequence to every episode of Dexter.
Yes, it did.
This, Wolf of Wall Street kind of, atmosphere that they have going on in this movie. We weren't that far away from the 80s yet, but this, I think, definitely started like a trend. I don't think this movie necessarily was the thing that started the trend or whatever, but in the early 2000s, it was all about the 80s coming back. And this movie was, I think, the first one to really do that, because a couple years later, then we would have the reemergence of like stuff from the 80s, such as like, toys that we were into and cartoons and stuff like that coming back or whatever, and movies being made in the 80s.
Yes, and especially in the teens, they had a lot of 1980s films. This is a film that I hope they never try and redo, reimagine, because honestly, I think it's perfect. You can't get the cast like this. I don't see anyone else playing Patrick Bateman like Christian Bale did. I mean, he put his heart and soul into it. I mean, this made him a star. He was doing more, co-starring roles.
Yeah, right. He wasn't quite Batman yet.
No, but this put him. He hadn't done The Machinist yet.
No, that's right.
He had done a number of things because this movie came out, and then Shaft came out.
Did you ever
in the same year?
Did you ever see the movie from 2002, directed by Morgan J. Freeman, not to be confused with Morgan Freeman of Shawshank Redemption fame, starring Mila Kunis as Rachel Bateman, I think, his sister?
Yes. With Mila Kunis, and I believe William Shatner's in that too.
Oh, yes. A highlight of William Shatner's career, yes.
No, it probably was.
This movie has an 11% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It has 11% on Rotten Tomatoes? That's,
American Psycho 2.
Oh, that movie.
Yeah, that movie. That's...
Bateman was wearing face masks before, which is very timely now. He definitely was all about cleanliness, washing his hands. You see him wearing gloves, going to the bathroom, washing his hands, doing all that, and making sure everything is very, very clean before he starts things. But this is a film that, before he starts things, which is a wink, wink. They had so many different people they were trying to put in this role. He was cast for it. He put it on hold and started it with somebody else. He waited again. He lost out on a few roles because he wanted this, and I think it was a solid bet because this showed such a range of his acting ability, and that just keeps getting better and better and better. I mean, he's one of the best actors of our generation, and I will stand by that statement.
The trailer really grabbed me in for this movie, which I thought was really great. Other people in this movie that I thought were really great as well, that I completely forgot were in this until later on. A very young Chloe Sevigny. Samantha Mathis is in this movie. When I met Samantha Mathis at a horror convention, she had a picture of her in her... I believe she's in her underwear in the movie and on her table, and I was like, "Oh, you were American Psycho," and she's like, "Yeah."
She played Courtney, his mistress, who was engaged to Lewis, one of his coworkers. Yeah, she was like a socialite.
who were the prostitutes in the movie?
Well, one prostitute was, what is it, Cara Seymour. One of the women who it wasn't a prostitute, it was his friend, who played his friend Elizabeth, who went to Sarah Lawrence. That's Genevieve Turner, who's one of the screenwriters of the movie.
I wonder why you would go from being. I wonder why you would put yourself as the screenwriter into the role of the film, and especially in that type of role.
Well, one, it's a different character. She plays it very, I mean, you've got someone where he's kind of desperate and he can't get another prostitute or something like that, so he gets a friend. I think she did a great job. I know we don't get to see it, but you can tell by her face, and when she sees him again, like just kind of things that she went through, and when she and the other prostitute were leaving, what they had gone through with just the scrapes on her shoulder and like a little bit of blood coming from her mouth. But if the reason why she would be in there, I couldn't see her if she was going to play any other part. I don't see any other part where that, I don't know, I could see her playing. I mean, if she didn't want to have any nudity, she couldn't play the either the prostitutes, and I don't see her playing Samantha Mathis or Evelyn's role, Reese Witherspoon. So if she can't play Jean, one hell of a job is Elizabeth. And since we're talking DC and Marvel, not only do we have a future Batman and a future Joker, but then we also have the father of the Fantastic Four, played by Reggie Cathy, who's the homeless man who meets a very horrible ending by Patrick Bateman. So, I mean, there's a lot of superheroes that are in this film.
Who's the father of the Fantastic Four?
The newest version of Fantastic Four.
Oh, that, yeah. I have tried to block that movie out.
Keller,
okay.
And Michael B. Jordan and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Now I remember. The one biggest thing I take away from this movie is like what is actually going on in his head and what is actually happening in real life, and what is the difference. Like, he fires a gun at a police car and the car completely blows up, and even he's astonished by the ability to do that, because that wouldn't actually really happen.
And yet it happens in so many films in 1987.
Right. But even he is like looking at the logistics and the actual, because, you know, on TV series like Mythbusters, they've shot a gun at a car's tank or whatever, and it didn't cause this ginormous explosion. The back end catches on fire, sparks, and blows up, but the front of the car is still perfectly fine. You know what I mean? Because they hit the gas tank. But it's not like this massive, like, giant explosion like in the street like it is when he is firing at the police, which is, you know, to his astonishment, like, whoa, did that really happen, or am I just that crazy?
Well, it's also the fact that you've got 4 policemen who are shooting him when he's completely open in the middle of the street, yet he doesn't get shot at.
Well,
he doesn't get shot.
They're just as good as shots as stormtroopers in Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I would think 4 of the policemen, at least one of them would have been able to hit even his coat. So that's one of the parts in the film that is this real? Is this his mind? Is the whole thing made up? I mean, that's always going to be speculation and stuff like that. I mean, do I think he did what he did? I think he did the killings, probably. I don't necessarily think that whole thing with the feeding the cat into the money dispenser and him just, you know, shooting the cops and doing all that. I don't think that happened. I do think that he probably did kill all those people. And when some people are like, well, how did he get away with it? You know, you can't just have someone have all these bodies in an apartment. And I'm like, with New York real estate, I could see them covering that up real quick, because the apartment that Paul Allen lived in probably is about $40,000 a month in 1987. So I can't even imagine how much that would be now. But all I know is that they would probably get rid of whatever they needed to get rid of to put that on the market again.
One of the best cosplays I see at conventions a lot of time is the Patrick Bateman in his suit, wearing the raincoat around it, carrying a fake axe, usually like a plastic toy axe, of course, at a convention, but splattered in blood, and people immediately know that he is from American Psycho. They don't know his name. They
Yeah.
call him American Psycho, but usually, you know, hardcore fans will at least know his actual name, and because he's never called American Psycho in the film.
How do you think the film would have been if David Cronenberg had directed and Brad Pitt had played Patrick Bateman?
Would have been interesting. I don't know of a ton of roles that squeaky clean Brad Pitt had been doing up until this point to play this type of character. Where he is like killing coworkers and women in pretty bad ways, that I could see him in that role. But maybe with Cronenberg, I think Cronenberg definitely would have had like a more interpersonal, into the view of the mind's eye of the killer kind of feeling to it. I mean, a few years later, he would do History of Violence.
I think it's Cronenberg and Pitt were set. They were, I think, two of the first ones to come on board to do the film. They were supposed to possibly do this in the early 90s.
You could never tell me in a million years what I ever had said the kid from Titanic was going to play him. Today, yes. 20 years later, if they decide to remake this movie, I would say absolutely Leonardo DiCaprio, especially after seeing The Wolf of Wall Street and several other movies that he's done. But at the time in 2000, he had just only done like Titanic and The Beach. And yeah, The Beach was this weird, trippy drug film. But honestly, I was still on the stigma of Titanic. And yeah, the movie The Man in the Iron Mask, kind of, sort of. But I just still was not going to see him playing this type of character. He just still had too much of a baby face, too, in 2000. I mean, he was insanely young. Much younger than Christian Bale was at this time.
Yeah, and he actually turned down this film to do The Beach.
Good.
But
I think people would have gone to that movie with sour grapes, like myself, and just been like, "Oh, seriously? That kid from Titanic?"
I think it would have been a huge. I mean, if he did really want to throw away all the fanfare from Titanic that he said he did and stuff, he would have done this. But I'm glad he didn't. I'm glad he did The Beach, and I'm glad that I believe he's set to do Devil in the White City, which I definitely see him playing H.H. Holmes more than I can see him playing Patrick Bateman. So when that comes out, I will be one of the first to get a ticket for that, if that ever does come out, because that's been in limbo regarding production, direction, starring roles for I think a decade now. I know Tom Cruise was attached to it and stuff. And speaking of Tom Cruise, apparently Christian Bale, to get into character, he had seen some interviews from Tom Cruise, and that's who he personified as Patrick Bateman. So when he got into his role, he's like, there was something about some deadness behind his eyes when he was doing an interview, and he was like, so that's what I did when I started to do Patrick Bateman. I just wanted to feel like I was Tom Cruise. And I'm like, wow, ouch. That's some harsh words.
Wow. Interesting. Well, the movie is available on several different streaming sites like iTunes, so you can definitely check it out unless you do happen to have the DVD. I do recommend a couple things, however. I don't know about an HD version on 4K, but the difference between the DVD and the Blu-ray is the Blu-ray contains all the bonus material of the DVD except for one thing, is sit down between Mary, the director, and the writer of the book, talking about the differences between the book and the movie. That's unfortunately not on the Blu-ray. I don't know why. Sometimes that stuff doesn't always carry over. It has something usually to do with rights and things like that. If you do want to check out the film with all of its cool material, definitely get the DVD, not the Blu-ray, just so you can get that 25 or 30 minute sit down between the director and the writer of the book. It's a great little compare and contrast between what they changed and what they made different to bring it to screen. I highly recommend American Psycho. Katie does as well. Check out the rest of the reviews here on the Radio Horror YouTube channel. Please stay safe and stay quarantined and watch some great horror movies. And we'll be back with another exciting movie review in a couple weeks with The Blonde in Front of Here. Do you want to say goodbye?
Bye. Stay safe. Stay home. And we'll see you soon.